All right, thanks to everybody who's here this afternoon for the Green Bank update. So I'm Karen O'Neill. I'll start this off, and I appreciate your guys' time. So the agenda for today is, again, a quick update by me just on observatory operations and where we are. This will be followed by 3 very brief talks on the various software tools that we have available for observers, starting with the proposal preparation software, then going into the data reduction software tools. And then finally, we're going to round this off with a discussion about a recent survey that was undertaken about Green Bank software that's here. As a reminder for everybody here, if you could put your questions into chat, that makes it a lot easier and makes it possible for everybody to see that. And then at the very end of the meeting, we'll also give a chance for anybody who's on the telephone to ask any questions if we have folks called in that way. So with that, let me just step you through quickly the current status of Green Bank Observatory and where we are in terms of operations underneath the COVID pandemic. The state of West Virginia itself continues to lift restrictions, with the majority of the restrictions in the state to be lifted by July the 2nd. That's the point when, for example, the Snowshoe Ski Resort in the county will be opening up. The governor of the state and the Department of Health and Human Resources continues to recommend the use of masks and social distancing within the state. There is no requirement, however, for that at the moment. The state's on a slight uptick in terms of COVID cases, but it still sits around 2%, well under the 3% that would cause a change in the restrictions within the state. And Pocahontas County is very similar to the state. Currently, we have 3 cases within the county, and those numbers come and go a bit as time goes on. Looking at the status of Green Bank Observatory itself, we remain in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week operation. We did move a few weeks ago to return to full operations status, which means that those folks who can telework are teleworking. But we do have about 60% of the staff currently coming on site for work. That's allowed us to get to full operations again. All the staff coming on site go through daily health checks. Of course, masks and so forth are required, and it's allowed the majority of scheduled activities to take place. It's just a little bit slower than it would be otherwise. So for example, if we're making a receiver change, we might have 2 people do some work, and then they'll back away and allow some other people to come in to allow that social distancing to take place. As I said, telework is required when it's possible, and unfortunately that means that all of our summer students are working remotely, as is true for many sites. Well, we certainly miss having the students around. Overall, this seems to be fairly successful, and we're happy that at least the students are able to get a research experience in this summer, even if it's not quite the experience that they had been hoping for. So in all, things are going fairly well. And as I said, most of the activities are able to take place. Looking at staffing changes, we've had a lot of hires lately. 3 new people that I announced a couple weeks ago are at work or underway. So that's Layla Marsha, a new digital electronics engineer. Bryn Gregory and Jesse Bublitz are all on the staff. We also just hired a new software engineer, Kathleen Purcell, who we're excited to have, will be joining the staff on July 6th. And Flora Paganelli is a new scientist who will be starting at the end of August. So that's all fantastic news. Sadly, though, Frank Ego is moving from full active status to emeritus status on June 30th. So he's retiring at the end of this month. We're glad he's at least staying with Emeritus, so we'll still see him around, but he is stepping out of an active role at the observatory after many years of fantastic work with us. And finally, looking forward a little bit, a couple upcoming events at the observatory. First, we have a conference going on. This is a conference focusing on the science of the planned Argus 144 instrument. This will be a virtual online workshop taking place at the end of September. Registration for this workshop is now open, and the abstract deadline is underway. And we'll be having our annual observer training as well the week of October the 12th. I don't believe registration for this is open yet. We are hoping to work with Arecibo and have training, both GBT training and Arecibo training the same week for folks that want to know about that. And details on that will be coming out soon. Again, the observer training will also be held virtually this fall, so that will complete the the training courses for us. And we're hoping that next year we'll be able to start bringing people back on site for the training. So with that, that's everything that I had, except to say you can see a new face here. There's Bren on the slides now that she's working for us, and we'll be adding new faces onto this as the summer goes on, which is fantastic. And if you have any questions, please put them in the chat room. But assuming I don't see any, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen and hand control of this over to Toney Minter now. And Toney is pulling things up as we speak.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the proposal submission tool, the sensitivity calculator, and the mapping planner tool. So proposal submissions done through the that's the wrong link. It should be my.nrio.edu. I'll apologize for that. So it's, that's the proposal submission tool. So it not only supports submission of proposals, but it also supports most of the proposal review process, including the technical and science reviews, along with the rankings of the proposals, and is used through the time allocation committee meeting. This tool is getting a bit long in the tooth, and a new tool is being proposed. We completed the requirements gathering for this new tool in late last year. It's been through an external conceptual design review earlier this year. We're now in the process of working out workflows and resource requirements with the hopeful aim of beginning development later this fall once the next physical year starts. And but just to let people know, it will likely take several years for this to be complete, because it is a pretty broad tool, as you saw before, and the things that it has to handle, and it gets fairly complex quite quickly.
Tony, I believe your slides disappeared for us.
And,
we just see a black screen.
well, I don't know what to tell you.
We could see it until you started the slideshow. So maybe if you just run it from the editor view.
Okay. So I'll just go back so people can quickly see it. The link should be my.nrio.edu. Apologize for putting that in wrong. Then the new tool. So we hope to begin development this fall, and it'll likely take a couple years for before it's released to the public for use. Sensitivity calculator, it's at that long link there at the beginning of the slide. This should be used in all proposals except for those that use a private backend. You can there's an area in the technical justification area where you can copy and paste the results from the sensitivity calculator and put it in there. It's highly recommended that you do that because it allows staff to reproduce your results fairly easily, and gives us a uniform set to go through and increases your chances of getting through the technical review without issues. If you do have many cases of observing where you have to provide, you know, say 15, for example, sensitivity calculations, it's okay to put in a representative example so we get the flavor of what's going on. We can check those, and then just for minor detail changes that you list in the technical justification, we can figure out how everything else is going on. For the upcoming proposal call deadline that will be August 3rd of this year, we have recently made some updates. TA star will now be supported. The output's being reformatted, hopefully a bit more readable for everybody and laid out in a little bit better fashion. And we also have been able to solve the issue with Argus and W-band trying to share the same TSYS information versus frequency, and now those are two separate entities, so it can be used independently for both those receivers coming up. And finally, there's the mapping planner tool written by Ron Maddalena. that allows you to estimate how long of a time period it'll take to make a map. If you are doing mapping, you should use this to get the estimated time for your observations, and it's highly useful to include these results into your proposal in the technical justification. And I just want to point out, with any of these tools, the proposal submission tool, the mapping planner, the sensitivity calculator, if you need any help regarding these tools, please contact our staff, and you can do this through the help desk at help.nrio.edu. And that's everything that I have.
Okay, thanks, Tony. I'm not sure, do people see my slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to do a slideshow. This is still, is it a black screen or is this,
Oh,
you
looks
can
good.
see the slide still?
Looks good, Dave.
Okay. My name is David Freyer. I'm a scientist also at the Green Bank Observatory, and I'll be going over some of the GBT data reduction tools. Before I put this together, I sat down and put my scientist hat on, not a staff hat, and thought about what areas of tools do users typically could expect at an observatory. I listed those categories down, and then I put what we actually have to the right of that. So, I mean, most people expect some kind of real tool analysis of data coming in, and we provide that with Spectral-Line data with the GBTIDL tool. There's a Pulsar data analysis package called Presto. We document our calibration pretty well on our default pipeline, and GBTIDL tool can apply default calibration, and users can apply more extensive calibration based on documentation. We do have a pipeline that can process from end to end. It works for some observing modes. And in terms of the data archive and tools, we use the NRAO archive access tool. It's a web-based tool, and you can download the raw GBT data. We do not archive data products as some observatories do. So the GBT supports many, many different observing modes. And given this, there are lots of different ways to reduce the data. In fact, there are thousands of different modes and options for the GBT. This is in contrast to like ALMA. ALMA, for example, you don't really control a lot of how your observations and calibration are done at all. And that enables them to develop a pipeline, because if you're only supporting a few modes, you can write a pipeline for that and make standard products. The GBT we have no restrictions on how observers can observe, except for the safety, of course, of the telescope and what it can physically do. There's a lot of different options. And our standard GBTIDL routines, as well as our GBT pipeline, supports the Spectral-Line data reduction for standard position switch and frequency switch observations in the cases where the noise diodes are turned on during the scan. So the calibration of our standard routines assume that each scan has calibration data within it. Other modes are supported by observatory software provided by staff or other users, as well as third-party software packages, which is done for the Pulsar data and Mustang and our special, what we consider special use cases. So the GBTIDL Spectral-Line package was produced in 2006. It provides a command line and GUI IDL interface with the functionality that was previously provided by, whoops, shoot. I was trying to close off my part of the Zoom window, which didn't allow me to see my own slides. That was provided by Unipops, and Unipops was a package used by the NRAO 12 meter and 140 foot telescopes. It has a nice GUI in the sense that you can view and you can calibrate your data in near real time. As soon as the scan is finished, you can look at it and make sure that you're taking data the way you expected. that you're taking it, and you can check and make sure things are working well. Users can also import whatever IDL and routines that they have and functions, so it's powerful in that sense. It does support the standard calibration we do at the GBT, data flagging, baseline removal, line fitting, and you can export the data in FITS format and or ASCII that you could use in other tools such as class and just plotting within Python or whatever. So this slide here shows a quick look of a frequency switched example. This is from Argus. So you have a routine that can just reduce the data scan and look at it in real time. The circle there just shows where the triplet spectral line is for this specific transition. It's another example of a GUI. This is H1 of an extragalactic source. The little blue boxes show where the baseline was fitted. In this particular case, the baseline was nice and flat, and there's only a DC offset that needed to be removed. The white line shows a double Gaussian fit of the line profile over the blue region. The end-to-end pipeline that we have, it's Python based, and it allows you to process the data all the way from raw data all the way to data cubes by just running one command. Up at the top, the GBT pipeline command right up there, that's an example call of this pipeline. You give it an input FITS file, you give it which scans you want to combine. -M means for the mapping scans 14 through 26, a reference scan, which is the off scan, and then you can say which spectral window you want, the channels you want, what you want to average, and there are some other options as well. So you just issue that command and you can fully calibrate your data and make data cubes. As I said, these are Python-based tools, and they've been used primarily for GBT mapping experiments and were designed originally for the KFPA, and the ammonia survey mapping teams as well as the Argus teams have adopted these tools. And Eric Rosky actually updated them for use for those survey teams. And so those teams they use it quite extensively. In terms of looking at an overview of Spectral-Line data processing, here's a flow chart. You have a raw data that includes all the antenna positions and all the other metadata as combined with the Vegas Spectral-Line data using a program called SDFITS to make an SDFITS file. And that's the input for GBTIDL as well as a pipeline. Then you can calibrate the data using the routines. And then once you get calibrated spectra, you can combine those with the co-adder, which we use the GBT gritter to make the output image cubes, which then can be analyzed in CASA or DS9 or your other favorite tool. For Pulsar data analysis tools, the Vegas data is actually recorded in Pulsar fits or PSR fits instead of single dish fits that the Spectral-Line modes are taken in. And the Pulsar data, there's a whole slew of third-party software. I'm familiar a little bit with Presto, but I'm not that familiar with the Pulsar tools. But if you need assistance or information about those, please contact Ryan Lynch or Scott Ransom, who actually wrote most of the Presto tool. This last slide here is just showing all the reduction software documentation. I'll make this available for people when I assume that we post these somewhere online. Anyway, this for GBTIDL, as well as all the other tools. I'd like to say that most of the reduction is done on computers locally. Users log into our system and they use our compute servers to carry out their data reduction because all the tools are already pre-configured and run here. Users can download GBTIDL and other tools on their home institutions and run the reduction software. There is a caveat on that. If you're want to have our weather database information or some of our other tools, then there's advantages of running locally because our weather data information is on our local machines. But other than that, most of these tools are exportable. And that's all I had to say for this. But for any questions? Are we saving the questions to the end?
There aren't any questions in the chat window, but we can
Okay.
certainly have it at the end. So if you do have questions throughout, just add them to the chat.
Okay, and then I'll see if I can stop what I'm doing. A little share button. Shoot. Here it is. I'm sorry, I apologize, Will. Here, I stopped my share now. Hopefully you can grab it, Will.
Muted Will. Hello, I am Will Armentrout, and I'm also a scientist here at the observatory. For this last bit of today's discussion, we'll be talking about a recent survey that GBT undertook, led by Ryan Lynch, about all of these tools that were discussed by Dave and Tony today. So our goals for this were to poll our user base and other astronomers throughout the community as to what software tools from GreenBank specifically are most used and why, whether our supported software tools are sufficient to plan for, carry out, and analyze their observations, and then looking forward, what data reduction preferences everyone has. So these are all helpful for us planning our next generation of observatory tools and data analysis software, including helping to guide which direction we move. At the bottom of this slide and every slide, I have a link to the full survey results if you'd like to look more in depth at any of the questions. As an overview, we had 37 responses. About half of everyone who responded had experience using Spectral-Line or continuum observations from the GreenBank telescope. Nearly a quarter were pulsar observers, and then roughly around a quarter had not yet used the GreenBank telescope. We also had sort of a bimodal distribution as to what I would call veteran GBT observers who had more than 10 projects, and then people who are just starting into GBT observing with 1 to 3 projects. This first block that we asked questions about was in preparing for observation. So we asked, how do you, our users, typically prepare astrid observing scripts and scheduling blocks? And so you can see the 5 options here were that I write my scripts from scratch using the observing guide. I write my own in consultation with staff. Staff provides examples which I modify. I copy and reuse scripts from other projects, or I don't write mine. A collaborator provides them. So by far, using example scripts from other projects is the most common method. I think we expected this. And this is likely okay, but it's also a chance for any bad practices from older scripts to propagate into many future ones. So as an action item for this, we are working on creating a repository of standardized scheduling blocks for common observing modes. This would basically be a quick look guide, or a quick start guide, excuse me, for observing modes across our frequency range. In relation to this, how do the following software tools meet your observing needs? And it seemed like in general, our observing planning tools were well received by the community. I have marked in red here that many people were not familiar with this tool. Some of these were people who had not used the GBT very much yet, but you can see that some of these go up into 50% of our users are not familiar with the tool. So in general, users seem to be happy with our observing tools, with some discontent for online data display, but much of our observer base is not familiar with the full suite of observing tools we have. An action item here might be to better advertise our tools and training videos more widely. So one opportunity we've had over the past few months is to work on our online suite of training material, including putting together online videos of introductory lectures. And so that's a way that we will be moving towards making everyone more familiar with these tools as they on-ramp to GBT observations. Next, we have data analysis software, and I've broken this up into 2 chunks, Spectral-Line observing and Pulsar observing. You can see by the first line that in general, people seem to be satisfied with using GBTIDL. We'll move more into this in the next slide, but 25% of respondents were completely satisfied with their GBTIDL use. Almost half were mostly satisfied. So 75% is completely or mostly satisfied with that tool. There was there were less contented responses for the pipeline and gritter. And I believe much of that was in wanting to understand more about the type of kernels that are used in the gritter, for instance, what kind of baseline is subtracted, and having more user control over those tools. For pulsar observing, there didn't seem to be many complaints in the suite of tools that we maintain for those reduction routines. The packages that we have seem to be sufficient for the community, although it would be fairly easy for us to bulk up these packages. On this next slide, we also asked, if given the choice, what program language would you use? So on the previous slide, I showed that in general, people were content with IDL, but if you look at this slide, if they had the choice, overwhelmingly, they would choose to reduce their data in Python. Python is the industry standard, and our users would much rather have it as an observatory supported language. We also have members of our user base that are actively writing Python reduction packages, which we could easily tap into if we moved more towards a Python core. Some other comments indicate that IDL seems to be a great tool for initial exploration, but that many of our users go elsewhere to complete their data reduction, sometimes with a few of the aforementioned packages. And so an action item here, which could require a significant amount of work and observatory committed resources, would be to explore what we actually need to create a Python core, what kind of partnerships or observatory supported software work would go into moving into a Python core. Let's see. These last few slides are summary thoughts from the full survey. Here we asked respondents to rank the importance of improvements to user software tools across all of the areas that we discussed in the poll. And it looks like they're pretty neck and neck here, but in first place for priorities, both sort of in this weighted rank and in what got the most first and second place votes, were data reduction and processing software tools. That seems to be the #1 requested area of work from our user base. In second place was archiving and archive access tools. It received the second most first and second place votes. And then in third place were observation planning and preparation tools. You can see that documentation came in last year. I think that's in part due to everyone understands that documentation is very necessary and it's an ongoing part of our software team's work, but it's not necessarily in the forefront of people's minds whenever they think about what they want from the observatory. Some summary thoughts are that we should do a better job advertising certain tools and resources, specifically for training, like training videos and data monitoring tools, that GBT users would overwhelmingly prefer a Python-based data reduction package, though GBTIDL seems to be sufficient for now. If new data reduction tools include a quick look feature, it may address some of the comments, negative comments about online data displays. One thing I haven't discussed is that we do have planned improvements and expansions of our archive. This is including work with NRAO and discussion of potentially bulked up on-site archive access. And so hopefully those planned improvements will help to meet our users' needs better. And finally, if we do devote resources specifically to observation planning tools, the sensitivity calculator from comments seems to be the thing to focus on. We also, though, should not forget relatively low-hanging fruit like the standardized scheduling blocks I mentioned previously. So again, you can find the full survey at this link, and I think we are happy to discuss anything that has come up in previous talks today or your thoughts on the survey.
I don't see anything that has come in on the chat window yet. So people can issue by chat, or might be small enough that you can feel free to ask your question orally if you so desire.
So Peter Tubin has a question on the archive. You can go ahead and unmute yourself if you would like, Peter.
We can do that too. Yes. So my question was that at some time in the past, not so long ago, less than a year, I was trying to get some archive data from the GBT through the NRAO archive, and I had some issues, and on 2 occasions sent an email, and I never got anything back from them. So I don't know how well they staffed that. I got a bit frustrated, and I got my data another way.
Peter, when you said send an email, did you send it to?
Oh, I meant I clicked on that button that is on their webpage, some issue thing.
Oh,
whatever.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's probably more on their tool. Contact that are just the general user help desk, so we're aware of it. For full disclosure, what happened was our system is set up in the past that we saved everything on local spinning disk, and when we archived it, it was archived locally, so you still had access to it. When we installed Vegas, which can make data a lot quicker, the NRAO system has had issues with the Vegas data, like restructuring their system for it, and there have been some gaps in terms of archive coverage. So once they removed the Vegas from our spinning disk at Green Bank, the only way to get it now is in principle from the archive. And they're completely, due to these issues with the access using the normal tool in the recent, well, it's actually been a year, 1 to 2 years now. They're re-ingesting everything, and they have a whole new but this is going up against their regular archive activities. So they're trying to solve our problems while building a new archive system. So it's a little bit in limbo. The data, all data still exists. If you can't get it directly, or you can't have like a collaborator who has access to disk, send in the help desk ticket and we can get data to anybody. But unfortunately, you might have to submit a help desk ticket.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And there's this other question. It would be very nice to have these workshops, or training videos for these tools available at the GBT for data reduction or access from the old data archive for those future astronomers down the road. Yep, I agree. More of a statement.
On that point, we have started recording training workshops, and those videos also are posted on the training page of the Green Bank Observatory website.
We have the training videos on how to observe, but if I'm reading this, maybe it'd be useful if we made training videos on going through data reduction as well. This step through it. I made some tutorial guides. They're just, very crude. They're not even at the level of like CASA guides or whatever, but it's just ASCII instructions and links to data. But it might be useful to make videos of those training videos of data reduction sessions to see what's involved.
Yeah.
To expand on that, because people seem to like the training videos. And since we have to train people remotely now, the more we have online, the better.
One other question in the chat was just for clarification, the shift to a Python core would essentially be moving all or most GBTIDL procedures to Python, or would it be limited to specific procedures?
That's a good question. People are working on it now. If they just took our regular GBT scripts, those are very limited. They only, like from my point of view, I always have to write my own scripts in GBTIDL because I don't have data with noise diodes. So I think if we do the core, or at least if I have input into it, I will try to make it more broader to handle more, even more use cases, or at least build the core in mind to support different ways of calibrating the data. The current system is set up such that you need everything you need to calibrate your data has to be contained as metadata with the scan itself. And that's not necessarily how people take their data. They might take some data, some scans where they get some calibration information, then take the science data separately. And that's a little bit of a roadblock on how the current scripts that are done in GBTIDL, as well as the Python-based ones that were written for the pipeline, which are in Python, but they were just mimicking what we did in GBTIDL. So we'll try to be broader if we do go to a Python core, to at least design methods in which you can select pieces of data within the scan that you need, and not try to do everything as black boxes. I think that would be a mistake. They just have a black box for every mode. We should design tools that provide access so users can tweak, can compile these tools together to do what they want instead of having rigid black boxes. And then we can build things and from the ground up to cover the other procedures, all other different observing modes, and support future modes that we haven't even thought of yet.